So welcome to this special Lunch and Learn for Lab Week. I hope that you are having a great week so far. We will be recording this session and sharing it with all of you in a follow-up email, which you can expect to receive by Friday afternoon. We want to thank all the attendees for joining us, and in general, thank all the medical laboratory professionals and pathologists who play a vital role in healthcare and patient advocacy. We cannot possibly thank you enough. We built this presentation entitled Improving Workflow Efficiency in the Modern Clinical Laboratory, especially for today, and we hope you enjoy it, enjoy your lunch, and have a great week. About lunch, we have a colleague online with us who will be issuing Uber Eats lunch vouchers for $25 to the first 50 pre-registered attendees. We realize that you may already be sitting down with your lunch in front of you, so you can use this voucher until tomorrow, 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Some quick housekeeping before we get started. We would love to hear your questions, but we do ask that you turn off your microphones during the presentation. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat by clicking on the chat button and sending it to us. We'll be monitoring the chat and answering your questions at regular intervals during the demonstration. We'll also have some time for an open forum of questions at the end. Moving right along, I'd like to introduce our presenters, an experienced panel of product managers, product specialists, and account managers, John Flasher, Jordan Lawrence, Maria Martinek, Chris Hardy, and Katrine Kelly. Each of them will be taking us through different areas of the clinical laboratory. And if you have any specific questions for any of them, you can reach out to them by email at any time. We'll provide their email addresses on the last slide and in our follow-up email. Before we dive into the content of the presentation, I'd like to just give you a brief overview of Advanced Instruments and the world-class instruments and consumables and services that we offer. The portfolio spans across many different laboratory departments, such as chemistry, hematology, microbiology, and quality control. And we're going to take you on a tour and to see and understand how Advanced Instruments can help in each of these departments, covering osmolarity testing in the clinical lab, cerebral spinal fluid testing in the hematology lab, bacterial cultivation in the microbiology lab, and then see how liquid volume verification can help ensure quality control in all areas. For 65 years, Advanced Instruments has been a global leader in osmolarity testing, and that has expanded into cell line development technology, liquid handling quality assurance, and more. Headquartered in Norwood, Massachusetts, with additional offices in Westbrook, Maine, and Wimborne in the UK, our reach extends across more than 90 countries. At our core, we value collaboration with our customers and prioritize building partnerships for seamless workflow integration. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jordan in the chemistry lab to talk about osmolarity testing.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk about osmolarity testing, which the definition is the concentration of particles dissolved in a body fluid. Or in body fluid, excuse me. So an example of this, to make you kind of wrap your head around it, is if you have 1 kilogram of water and then you add 1 mole of sodium chloride, it's going to dissolve the ions, and it's going to turn into 1 mole of sodium and 1 mole of chloride. Which that means there's 2 osmoles in the of ions in the 1 kilogram of water. So this is really powerful testing. This helps the physicians make a quick and accurate diagnosis for a wide range of disorders. And I gave you like a normal result up there so you can kind of see. So for urine, 500 to 850 milliosmoles per kilogram is like an average for urine. So freezing point depression, that is the technology that we use in our instruments, and I'll show you those a little later. But for our instruments, they test serum and plasma and urine. And how the technology works, there's this graph right here for you to see. So it starts with cooling the sample down, super cooling it past the sample freezing point, and then the freezing is initiated. And to get that back up to the freezing point, there's like a freeze pulse. And again, I'll show you that in a little bit, to bring that, have the heat fusion released, to then bring that to the plateau of the measurement. And then that is where we take the measurement of the temperature when it hits the plateau. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so why is this important? This is really important to help physicians like narrow down their diagnoses to a short list. And so they have this wide range of hundreds of different options. And when they get this result back, it can help them and narrow it down. In life-threatening cases, say in the ER, when you get this test, it's quick and accurate, and it could save a patient's life. So this checks the raw material concentration and performs the in-process monitoring of purification and filtration steps to maximize purity, cells and virus stability, and yield. And freezing point depression actually is the only method truly independent of size, shape, and other physical characteristics of liquid solution, which makes this the gold standard, the preferred solution for testing in clinical laboratories around the world. And what does it test for? It tests for electrolyte disorders, ingestions of various alcohols and alcohol derivatives, metabolic acidosis, and monitoring active drug therapies. Pretty cool, pretty unique. So next slide. This is our instruments that we have that test osmolality. So we have the Osmo 1, and it does one sample at a time also. It's our single sample osmolality tester or osmometer, and it's ideally suited for clinical laboratories. Unique thing, it only needs 20 microliters of sample, and it takes 90 seconds of test time. But in a robust lab, you need more automation. So we created this semi-automated Osmo PRO, and it's a multi-sample micro Osmo tester. Multi-sample, as I said before, and it has 20 samples on it. You can perform the controls, and you can also perform the testing of the patient samples. It's semi-automatic because you need to pipette into the test sample still, or the test tube still, but it's walk-away testing, so you can set it all up and have it test as it goes. Again, only 20 microliters of sample. But on the next slide, I'm going to show you a demonstration of the Osmo Pro Live. So this is just a animation just to give you kind of the look and feel of how it works. So this is what it looks like. Looks honestly similar to this. It's kind of funny. Very easy to use. Doesn't need a lot of training. There's the 20 positions with a wiper ring that they're putting on. And it has a barcode just integrated right onto the system, and it can scan barcodes that you have, or you can implement it through the screen with the touch screen, which is really unique. And then this is where you pipette the 20 microliters of sample. This is how it's the semi-automated, where you still need to pipette into the test tube. And then we're going to get into the technology behind it. So it's going to place it on there, easy loading. You'll just click wherever. It does not have to be at the number 1 position. You can put it wherever and just tell it where it is. Click start. And then it's going to pop up with the graph that I just showed you, kind of showing what happens. Past the freezing point, and then there's that freeze pulse to knock it back up to the freezing point for the plateau, and then the measurement's taken. And it can connect to your different systems to make it easier. There's 4 different ways to look at the results on the screen, printing out, USB connection. And lastly, connects right to your computer. Make it really simple and easy for you. 20 samples, 20 microliters, touchscreen options, leading accuracy and precision, the gold standard for testing. in the clinical laboratories. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about osmolality, let me know. Now we're going to go over to the microbiology lab. Take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Jordan. So as Jordan mentioned, so we're in the microbiology lab right now. So we're going to talk about the Anoxomat jar system. So we're talking about anaerobes, campies, capnophils, all that good stuff. So a little product overview here. What is Anoxomat? So Anoxomat is a device that utilizes a nitrogen, CO2, and hydrogen gas mixture to create anaerobic, microaerophilic, and other custom environments in a matter of minutes. And how does it work? It utilizes Macintosh and Phillips method of gas exchange. So it's going to evacuate and replace that gas inside of the connected jar to create your desired environment. And throughout the whole environment generation process, we have built-in QC tests too throughout it. And we'll further elaborate on that on the next slide. But why use it? It enables faster growth of bacteria and allows labs to have this peace of mind that you have your environment intact in a suitable amount of time, and to make sure that you get the correct treatment throughout the whole process too. So you can go to the next slide here. So kind of digging deeper into the operational method, i.e. Macintosh and Phillips method of gas exchange. So the built-in recipes for Anoxomat are the anaerobic recipe and the microaerophilic recipe. For the anaerobic recipe, it does this evacuation replacement 3 times. At each time, 80% of the jar contents is removed by the system. And after the 3rd cycle, there's 0.16% oxygen remaining. And then we have a palladium catalyst to sequester the rest of it to create the true anaerobic environment. And you have an anaerobic environment in 5 minutes. Now moving on to the microaerophilic recipe, i.e. the campy recipe, as I like to call it. It does this evacuation replacement 1 time, and hence the less amount of time it takes to create the environment in 3 minutes. And the default O2 level with this environment is 6%. So as you see here, we have some screenshots. So the one on the left, this is when you turn on the instrument. Again, it's going to have your built-in recipes, microaerophilic, anaerobic, and then you have your custom recipes under the saved ones. And then this on the right, this is the QC test that I mentioned before. And this is the biggest part about the system. So the first test, as you see here, is the gas connection test. So it's going to detect if there's enough gas being fed into the system. The next test is the jar connector test. This detects if the jar is connected via a sensor at the end of the jar connector. The next 2 are the leak and seal tests. This pretty much detects if there's any compromise in the jar lid. And then the next test with the anaerobic recipe, there's a catalyst test. So it's going to detect if there's the presence of a catalyst, the palladium catalyst, as I mentioned before. And then it's going to tell you when it's ready, you disconnect the jar and you put it in the incubator. So as you see here, throughout this, you see some check marks, some X marks. So if you get an X mark, there are some quick troubleshooting mechanisms associated with that. Let's say, for instance, your seal and leak test failed. Maybe I got to change a jar lid. If my gas connection test failed, maybe I got to put a little more gas in the system. As you see here, it's pretty intuitive, and you know right then and there that is something wrong, and you have a peace of mind that your environment is intact. So we go to the next slide here. This is a quick demo video. It's about 2-3 minutes, but it kind of just highlights everything similar to the Osmo PRO demo video that we showed before. So these are different jar types that we have. We have our ergonomic jars and our standard jars. And we fit anywhere from 12 plates, 24, 36 plates, et cetera, to accommodate different workflows. You load up the plates in the jar, put a sachet in there, close up the jar lid, connect the jar. Similar to the other jar, this is 12 plates here for your catalyst. And you see a little click with these jars, so you know that it's shut. Connect your jar, and you click start. Now you have the QC test associated with the environment that you want to select, like the environment you want. It's going to do this evacuation replacement. So this is going to be the anaerobic recipe. So we're starting at atmospheric pressure. It's going to go down to about 200 bar. It's going to detect if the jar lid's on there. Now it's going to go back up near atmospheric pressure, the catalyst test. As you see, you can see the arrows, kind of gas coming in, gas coming out. And it's just going to it does this evacuation placement 3 times. We're back at atmospheric pressure, down to 200 bar, back up to atmospheric pressure, so on and so forth. So the cycle is complete and you disconnect your jar and you put it in the incubator. So this is pretty much in lieu of you putting maybe a sachet in there. And as you see a printout of some of the QC tests highlighted there. But this is pretty much with all those tests, and I need to highlight those tests because that's the biggest proponent of this system. It's rather than you putting a plate inside a bag with a sachet, thrown in the incubator, and maybe 24 hours later, your indicator strip didn't turn colorless, and now you got to do things over again. Or maybe your chamber was, needed maintenance and it broke down overnight on third shift, and you only had one person on shift to try to fix it, and you got to redo all those samples too. So this tells you right then and there that everything is all set. That's Anoxomat in a nutshell, and I believe that's the last slide. And we're going to be moving to the hematology lab with my colleague Maria.
Maria, unfortunately, can't make it to this one, but my name's John Flasher. I'm a medical laboratory scientist by trade, clinical product manager here at Advanced Instruments, and I will jump right into this presentation to give you an overview on the why and the how. So as you all know, as medical laboratory scientists, CSF holds important information for the diagnosis of many different conditions of the central nervous system. So the reason we perform a CSF cell count is to help support the doctor's diagnosis or decision-making process around things like infections, so like meningitis, encephalitis. Maybe they have an active or previous subarachnoid hemorrhage, an abscess, a tumor, an infarct, or maybe just general inflammation. And as you know, we usually collect this, unless a patient has something like a shunt, which doesn't always provide the highest quality sample. We usually collect this through lumbar puncture or a spinal tap. And as you know, typically 4 tubes are collected because usually if there is something like a traumatic tap, because spinal taps are hard, that blood that will result from that traumatic tap will be in that first tube and then will slowly lessen over the collection of those 4 tubes, leaving the 3rd or 4th tube relatively bloodless and as it was in the patient's body. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide. Okay, so how are we typically doing this now? So if you're in the hematology lab or if you're in, a smaller hospital laboratory where you have to handle and cover multiple departments at once, you feel this slide when you look at it, right? So if you're somebody who's had to load the hemocytometer, prepare that moist environment with your wet gauze and your Petri dish, load your counting chamber, and set a timer and wait those 10 minutes while you walk away, maybe manage the coag instrument or do that recalibration on the chemistry instrument, or I don't know, maybe a cross match just came in. You have to run over to the blood bank and do a quick cross match or call a stat result to a physician. It's easy to lose track of time. It's easy not to get right back to your hemocytometer slide when that timer goes off. It's just a bunch of different things that could happen in those 10 minutes that could lead you to not immediately getting to your slide, which can lead techs to do a couple different things. Either they wait too long and it could potentially dry out, or they don't wait long enough and those cells don't settle into the field that they'll actually be observing under their microscope. Sometimes there's a lot of red cells or white cells. You go to look at them the first time after you let those cells settle and oh my gosh, they're all stacked up on top of each other like stacks of coins that are teeter-tottering, and you realize, okay, there's no way I'm going to be able to count these, so I'm going to have to do a dilution. Well, guess what? You go back, you do your 1 to 10, you go through all of this again, you load your chamber, you wait the 10 minutes, and then you look at the microscope again to see, okay, did I dilute enough? Should I have diluted more? And you kind of, go over this again and again, depending on how many red cells or white cells are in the sample until you get it right. But let's say, your CSF is clear and it's full steam ahead. Now you have to determine, okay, how many squares are we going to count? Are we counting both sides, A and B? Cleaning the chamber, I guess there could be an introduction of cross-contamination there, but I trust everyone here on the call is pretty good at cleaning their hemocytometer chambers. And then you have to determine, whether or not you have to repeat, depending on what the difference is and what's allowable in your SOP. And then let's say, you did have to perform a dilution. Okay, so now we have to do a quick calculation, determine what our results are in cells per microliter, and then manually enter it into our LIS, depending on what our count was. A lot of folks can do this relatively fast. Some folks really like to take their time. But at the end of the day, all of these different steps could introduce potential for both random and non-random error that could lead to result variation and have an impact on patient care, potentially. All right, can we move on to the next slide? Okay, and then when it comes to what technology is out there to help us do this in a more automated fashion. So historically, there have been some performance issues with some commercially available automated methods that present a challenge, specifically with the CSF sample type. And I say that because when it comes to CSF, we know that the critical counts are on the low range of that count, right? So there's a lot of analyzers out there that can count cells in, the hundreds or in the thousands, when especially when it comes to the red blood cell count. But there aren't a ton of analyzers down there that can accurately count way down to the low end of the range. So when you're talking about a highly cellular body fluid, that's fine. But when you're talking about CSF, that presents a challenge because the reference range for total nucleated cells in CSF are only about 0 to 5 cells per microliter. And a normal CSF shouldn't have any red blood cells at all, right? So being able to know if the count of red blood cells is normal or abnormal, you're either going to rely on that manual method that we were referring to on the last slide, or something like an automated method that really can't report down to those low range. It doesn't have linearity down to that low range. And for that reason, manual chamber counts for CSF have been considered the gold standard, and for good reason, because we're techs, we know what we're doing. But like I said, because of all those different things that are going on the other slide, there's just, the potential for error to be introduced in so many different ways, which is why we thought we would show you our glow site analyzer for CSF. So if you want to go to the next slide, let's see if I can do this relatively smoothly. So this is it here. So what you're seeing on the screen here is your 30 microliter pipettes, your sample tray, which has a space for your red blood cell reagent, which is going to sit in front of the red oval here, which contains this little black thing, which is your actual test cartridge, and your sample cup here. And then over here, where there's no red circle next to it, you're going to have your white blood cell reagent, your sample cup, and your test cartridge here. Over here is a place for your standards, for your controls. We're actually going to use one of our standards as our patient sample today, since we're running a demo. And I don't have anyone's CSF sitting around for good reason, because we're here at our home site in Norwood. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of walk through how easy it is to go ahead and set up and run this test. So we're just going to grab our 30 microliter pipette, grab a pipette tip, take our sample, and we're simply just going to pipette 30 microliters of sample into each of the sample cups. Go ahead and close that up. And I promise I'm not just dumping pipettes onto the ground. There is a trash can off screen. I'm not just littering in the office here. Okay, and next, the first thing that we're going to set up is our red blood cell count. So we're going to go over here again to the reagent in front of the red oval, and we're going to open up our red blood cell reagent. And again, we're just going to take up 30 microliters. So pretty simple, no bouncing back and forth between volumes. You just change your tip, go in, add your reagent, and you mix 5 times. Beautiful. And then you're going to go ahead and close that off and ditch your tip again. And with the red blood cell reagent, we're going to let that incubate for 3 minutes. And the reason we let that incubate for 3 minutes while we set up the white blood cell test is because the red cell reagent actually has a fluorochrome-bound antibody that's going to bind to antigens on the surface of the red blood cell. So we need to give that time for all of those antibodies to adhere to those red cell surface antigens. And in the meantime, while we let that 3 minutes go, we'll go ahead and add our white cell reagent to our other sample cup. And again, we're going to add that in, and we're going to mix it 5 times. And then we're going to go ahead and pre-wet that 3 times. And just take up 30 microliters of sample. So because the white cell reagent directly stains the nucleus of our nucleated cells, we don't really have to worry about letting it sit around for the 3 minutes. And we're going to go ahead and add it right to our test cartridge. And I don't know how well you can see the test cartridge, but in the middle of that black test cartridge, there's a little white dot, and that's our membrane. That's where our cells are actually going to get trapped, and what the objective within the glow sight instrument is actually going to look at to make the count. But before we put it on the glow sight instrument, first we need to take the fluid that I just put onto the membrane and suck it down through into the cartridge so we can actually trap those cells on the membrane and get a good image with our glow sight analyzer. So this neat little gizmo here is our vacuum chamber. And you just simply load it here and you hit push. And it takes and sucks that CSF sample down into the bottom of that cartridge. We go ahead and remove that. We open up this little drawer on the glow sight analyzer. Go ahead and load the cartridge. Close it. And then we come over here. And let's see how tech savvy I can be. We switch screens. All right, look at that. And we add some of our patient information. So here we're going to select patient. And then all of these other boxes pop up for you to input other information. So the first thing we're going to do is add the accession number. The computer that you would receive with the glow sight analyzer comes with a barcode scanner. So you'll actually be able to scan your accession number right into the software. But in this case, we're just doing a demo. So I'm just going to call this sample demo 1. And then we're going to go ahead and run the total nucleated cell count. And that's the only one we're going to run today. But I just wanted to show you the red cell setup as I went through the process to show you how easy it was to do everything and how quick you could get it done. Then you're going to go and input your dilution factor. If you know you have a particularly bloody sample, you can put it in now. Otherwise, if you were to load a bloody sample in that is too hypercellular, once you hit run on the test, the software will actually tell you, hey, you should consider a dilution. And there's actually a little guide over here on the right side of the screen that tells you what dilutions to consider. But for now, we're going to pretend that this one doesn't need a dilution, because if we select the appearance, the CSF looks clear and it's colorless. Otherwise, relatively normal looking. And we're going to say we got this from the third tube, because like I was talking about before, it's those last couple tubes that are best for cell counts like this. And that's it. Once you put in all of your information, your lot numbers for your cartridges and your reagents should already be preloaded. You just go ahead and you click this blinking green button. It says Start TNC Test. And there you go. It goes ahead and it takes a picture of that fluorescent field, so you can see all of those nucleated cells fluorescing within that field. And then the software goes ahead and, based on the volume that you put in, which is 30 microliters, it makes a determination on how many cells per microliter on the sample. And in this case, it's about 46. So at this time, then you go ahead and take and pre-wet the red cell. Pre-wet the red cell reagent mixture and do the same thing. You'd add it to the cartridge. You'd go ahead and suck the sample down through into the bottom of the cartridge with the vacuum, add it to the glow sight analyzer, and get your image. And you can do both the total nucleated cell count and the red blood cell count in about 5 minutes as you kind of work through, if you're not providing an explanation of the demonstration as you go through the process. But this can be a huge time saver for laboratories. It can take a lot out of your hands. It takes away the waiting period when you're preparing your manual hemocytometer. And it provides some turnaround time improvements from the time that it's ordered to the time that you actually report the results to the physician. In fact, Mercy One in Des Moines, Iowa saw about a 17 to 30 minute turnaround time improvement when we took a retrospective look back at all of their data for these CSF cell counts from the time they were performing their cell counts manually to the time they started using the glow sight over a 1-year period. So tremendous benefits in turnaround time. It makes things easier. It introduces less potential for manual error and tech-to-tech result variation. There's just tons of benefits that this can provide to you in your laboratory. And if you're interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to my colleague, Maria Martinek, who again wasn't able to join, but has a wealth of experience within the hematology field and be more than willing to answer all of your questions. But that concludes my part of the presentation and the live glow sight demonstration. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Kate to run through some liquid volume verification in the QC lab.
Now, about RTAL. RTAL technology has been around since the 1980s, providing liquid handling quality assurance globally to our customers. We provide tools to help labs such as yours harmonize your data quality when it comes to handheld pipettes and automated liquid handlers. And the method is based upon dual dye ratiometric photometry and meets ISO 8655-7-2022, 8-2022, and fulfills requirements for QMS 23 2019, ISO 17025, CGMP, and CGLP. It also meets the requirements for 21 CFR Part 11 compliance. Essentially, what we're doing is we're taking two readings at 520 and 730 nanometers, and it's reading the absorption difference between the blue dye and varying concentrations of our red dye. The verification and calibration is NIST traceable down to 10 nanoliters, and we specialize in low volume liquid verification with our instruments, service, and training options. The focus of today's demonstration will be on the PCS pipette calibration system. The PCS enables our customers to calibrate or verify single channel pipettes with a volume range of 0.1 microliters up to 5,000 microliters. The RTALware software can also connect to balances for calibration of volumes greater than 5 ml. And the system includes a built-in operator competency assessment module for ad hoc or scheduled assessments of your users. And the PCS generates results that are traceable to the international system of units maintained by NIST. So operation of the PCS is designed to be very simple. With a blank vial in the instrument, it takes an initial absorption reading at 730 nanometers. And next, you'll pipette the range solution or the red dye into the blank vial, close the lid. The instrument takes a second reading at 520 nanometers, providing you with an immediate result. Okay, so now we're going to go into the live demonstration portion for the RTAL PCS. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see the software. Okay, so this is the home screen of the PCS software. So today I'm going to do a 5 data point calibration. Okay, so you should see the PCS instrument on the counter there and my screen as well for the software. So I'm going to do a 5 data point calibration. I'm going to click on the scan barcode option on the home screen of the software. And you can see on the side of my instrument, the barcode scanner is lit up. So I'll scan my pipette. This is the barcode label that the system generates. And now I'm going to perform a scheduled calibration. I'm going to grab the range 1 solution that I pre-poured into my aliquot, and the system is asking me to scan the QualiSure 1 bottle. So it's taking that initial reading, and now it's ready for my first sample. So as soon as it's ready, the lid will automatically open as you saw. I pipette my sample into the instrument or into the vial in the instrument and touch the side to close the lid. It's going to mix the two solutions together and take that second reading at 520 nanometers, and the results will display on the screen. Now it's ready for my second sample. After the second sample is dispensed, the statistics will update across the top. It will display the standard deviation, mean volume, inaccuracy, and imprecision as you go. So you can immediately see if you have a problem with any of your data points. And speaking of problems, I'm going to go ahead and over-deliver this one sample on purpose. I'm just dispensing from, or aspirating rather, from the second stop to over-deliver. So now you can see immediately the boxes at the top go from green to red, giving you a visual indication that there's a problem with one of your data points. So I'm going to go ahead and dispense my fifth and final data point. And before I finish this, you'll notice on the right-hand side, I have two options that are grayed out right now. Once that fifth and final data point has completed, those become available to me now. So I'm going to redo that one that I over-aspirated, and I'm going to click on Redo Replicate. And once I do that, this window appears, and I have to enter in a reason or a comment for the redo. So I'll enter that in and click OK. And now it immediately asks me to redo that sample. And once it takes that sample and recalculates everything, you can see now I'm back within my tolerance limits for my inaccuracy and imprecision. It will still show that over delivery right there, or that redone data point, but it doesn't include it in the calculations. Next, I can record environmental conditions if I need to do that. And then I can record pipette tip information. This was particularly helpful to facilities during the pandemic when there was a tip shortage and they were evaluating different manufacturer tips. And I can add an overall comment. Once I have everything entered in, I click Finish, enter in my user credentials, and sign. And then send it to the people that need to review the calibration and sign off. So this is what the calibration report looks like right here. If I scroll down to the bottom, you can see it still says pending for approval. But if I scroll back up very quickly, you can see there's the pipette ID. All of my statistics are there. Each of my replicates, including the one that I redid, the reason for the redo, and all of the solutions that I scanned in during the calibration process. So I'm going to close out of this report and go back to the home screen. I'm going to log out as the user and log in as a reviewer. So now I'm logged in as a reviewer. I'm going to click on my bar that says ready for review right here. I have 3 calibrations that require my attention. There's the pipette that I just calibrated. You can see it says pending. If I click on view report, as a reviewer, I have 2 options at the top, a green check to approve the calibration or a red X to reject the calibration. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the green check mark and enter in my credentials. And click sign. So now I have this report. It's everything looks exactly the same, except if I scroll down to the bottom, you can see my e-signature right here. The approval status is now approved, and the reviewer comment says calibration approved. At this point, I can go ahead and export this report to PDF, Word, or Excel. So I'll go ahead and export this to PDF. And now I can also print the report if I want to as well. So I'm going to go back to the home screen again. Let's say another thing that you can do, you can bring in, or rather import reports into the software. So if you're doing an ad hoc calibration for a pipette that was sent out, you can select your pipette from the list and select the calibration type. So we're going to do external pipette calibration, and we will call this a service repair. And then we'll click on Start Calibration. And here I can go in and select that report and import it into the software. So there's my report right there. I can click Open. You can enter in the calibration date if you need to change that based on the report, the calibration status, and evaluation criteria right there. You can also enter in your statistics right here if you need to, or you can just leave it as is and upload external calibration report and sign off. And now your report is stored in the software. So you can go ahead and click on the attachment to view the report there. And you don't need to save that paper copy that you received back from the repair center. So that is all that I have today. I'm going to stop sharing. And are there any questions about any of the products that we reviewed with you today?
Oh, hello. I have a question about the RTL system. So I use the RTL system in my organization. It was set up by Equipment Services, but we are forced to use 10 replicates. So for every volume that we test, we use 10 replicates. But I saw that during the demonstration, it's possible to have only 5. So I just wanted to ask, do you recommend using 10 replicates, or is it okay to use 5?
So we do recommend a quarterly control check of 10 data points per volume. Some facilities will do 5, some will do a 4 data point quick check once a month. It really depends on what your SOP says, but you can change that within the software. But you really want to make sure that you're following your SOP, check with your quality department, make sure that that's okay.
Okay.
We can remain on the line for just a couple minutes, but I wanted to say again, thank you to all of you for doing what you do. Hope you have a wonderful lab week. You continue to have a great lab week, and we will be sending you a follow-up email with a link to this presentation if you want to share it with any of your colleagues, and it'll also have contact information so you can get in touch with any of us and ask any additional questions that you may have. Thank you very much.